In chapter 14, we are going to deal with third declension nouns. Let's remind ourselves what we know about nouns in Greek, right? Nouns follow certain patterns where they add case endings. They look like little suffixes added onto the end of the word. And we group those words together who do so commonly in declensions, right? Declension is just a fancy word for pattern. Just a fancy word for pattern, noun pattern. So far we've had first declension nouns, pattern 1 nouns, and we've had second declension nouns. So let's review what we know about those. Well, first declension nouns are primarily feminine, right? Primarily feminine. So we think about the word phone, for example. That's our paradigm word. And we also have the paradigm word cardia. So we saw that within the first declension there's an eta variation and an alpha variation, and then there's also a hybrid form, doxa or thalassa, where the last letter of the noun stem is either a double sigma or xi, and in those the singular is hybrid between cardia and phone. So you'll have the cardia pattern, the phone pattern, the phone pattern, the cardia pattern. Those would be the endings for the singular forms of doxa and thalassa, right? And within these noun declensions, you have nominative, genitive, dative, and accusative as the four main cases, and of course there's also a fifth rare case, the vocative. We also saw that there are a few feminine nouns of the second declension, which we're going to do in a moment, and there are masculine nouns of the first declension. So we have a very small group of nouns that do not fit the normal pattern. Again, the article is always the DNA test. So we have feminine nouns that follow second declension, which we'll look at in a moment, and we have masculine nouns that follow first declension. Okay, so that's what we know about first declension. What do we know about the second declension, right? Second pattern of nouns. The second pattern we studied where we add these different case endings, these little suffixes, onto the ends of nouns so that those little endings tell us if the noun is nominative, genitive, dative, or accusative. Basically, is it functioning as a subject to express possession, indirect object, or direct object? Okay, second declension nouns are either masculine, like the noun ha logos, right? Ha logos, or neuter, like the noun ta technon. And though there is some variation between those patterns, they're close enough that we're grouping them together and calling them the second declension, as every Greek grammar does. This is not just us. This is the normal way of talking about this for a long time. So let's talk now about third declension. All right, third declension. This is our final pattern of nouns that we're going to study. Well, you might ask yourself, well, what gender are they going to be? Well, within the third declension, you have masculine nouns, you have feminine nouns, and you have neuter nouns. So you have all three genders represented within the category of third declension. Now, a noun, when it's masculine, it's just going to stay masculine. It doesn't move among the genders. A noun is feminine, stays feminine. A noun is neuter, and it stays neuter. So, for example, we have the third declension noun ta pneuma, right? And this is a neuter noun. Or we have the third declension noun he gune, right? And that is a feminine noun. This means woman. This means spirit. Or we have the masculine noun ha aner, which means man. So one of the things you need to do with third declension nouns is memorize the article with the lexical form to make sure you are getting the gender of that noun correctly. So you're driving that into your head. And as we already said, one of the things you need to do, like when we talked about vocabulary in the last chapter, you must memorize third declension nouns with the genitive form. So when you memorize the word for spirit, the word meaning spirit, I want you to memorize ta pneuma. And remember, we do in fact pronounce those two consonant sounds distinctly, pneuma. Ta pneuma, tu pneumatas. Now, why are we doing that? Why are we memorizing? Up till now, we've basically always just memorized the nominative form to learn the noun. Well, the reason we have to memorize the genitive is to get the entire stem that the rest of the noun builds off of. Many times part of the stem has dropped off in the nominative or has combined. So we memorize that genitive to get the stem. How do you get the stem? Well, you cut os off, or we'll see in some forms the endings and some of the more difficult forms is us or os. So we're going to cut off this os ending, or an ending that looks close to it, and what's left is going to be our stem. So if we were to build this, we'll look at a cleaner chart of it in just a moment, but if we were to build this, what will we do? Well, the good news is there are no new articles, right? You've learned all the masculine, feminine, and neuter articles, and the good news is also the article will be there much of the time. Look at that exclamation point. That's an exclamation point of joy, because if the article is there, all the work is done for you. It's parsed by the article, so don't worry about it. So there is some good news with third declensions. Okay, as we build this, I like to think about those old-timey things they would have at train stations or airports, and where the cards would flip over for telling when the flights are arriving and leaving. So I just imagine falling down beneath this is pneumat, right? That's our stem. Pneumat. Maybe some of you young kids need to watch. I think that's on the Home Alone movie. They have if you watch that classic, when they're at the airport, I think the arrival boards are doing this. Now, of course, we have big flat screen TVs that do this for us. But pneumat. Okay, so there we go. So now, how about the endings? What do we add on? Well, when it comes to third declension, there's a neuter set of endings, and there's a masculine/feminine set of endings. They're very close, but they're distinct. So just to write this out, just to make sure you get this. Okay, when it comes to third declension nouns, there's a neuter set of endings, and then there's a masculine/feminine set of endings. Basically, two very close sets of endings. Sometimes these endings combine, crash in with it, so they're not always. It's not just like logos. Okay, there's a reason. There's a chapter for this third declension nouns. They're a little bit tricky sometimes. Of course, what is pneuma? Pneuma is a neuter noun, so we're talking about neuter nouns right now. So let's add the regular endings for this. The regular ending for the dative is going to be, let me do a different color, is going to be a iota. And think about it, you're used to seeing a iota like that for the dative, but it's subscripted. The good news about the neuter, whenever you know the nominative form, you also know the accusative form. So we don't even have to think about that. Pardon me, we don't have to think about that. Just there it is. It's pneuma and pneuma, right? They are going to be mirror images of each other. So when we memorize that lexical form, we are also memorizing the accusative form for the neuter. Then what are we going to add in the plural? We're going to add an alpha here, right? And of course this is going to mirror this. We're going to add an alpha here. That actually, if you think about it, again, is very close. You're used to that alpha ending from the neuter second declension, right? And then what do you think we'll add for the genitive? Yes, you need to own that ending, right? Own that. It's always the same. And then for the dative plural, you're going to add something a little bit different. You're going to add sin, and that nu is a movable nu. And what usually happens here is a letter will drop out, or a letter will combine, or a letter will be added to help with the pronunciation of the dative plural. I tell students, one way you can think about this, dative plural is like plural dates, okay? And I'm talking to the single people in the room here. I say plural dates are complex, right? It leads to complexity when you start having multiple dates with the same person, right? Expect some complexity in the dative plural. Also, there is a danger spending time alone with some member of the opposite sex, a danger of sin. So be careful with plural dates that they do not lead to sexual sin. So that is just a memory device to help us remember the dative plural ending is sin. So that's the whole paradigm. Again, the case meanings are the same. It's not tricky. Let's get something we can underline this here. So we have the spirit of the spirit, to or for the spirit is the direct object, the spirits of the spirits, to or for the spirits, the spirits. Here it is a little bit cleaner, right? A little bit more nicely formatted. Notice again, nominative, genitive, dative, accusative, singular, plural, just like no surprises here. Just what you expect with a noun. We have the articles, the neuter articles that you know. There are no new neuter articles. What is different is is the endings, right? There's overlap. There's certainly overlap. Own, right? Here, alpha, alpha, just like techna, right? We're used to seeing a iota subscripted, not on the end, but there it is. But there's also we're also, it's nice that we have mirror images of each other, as we always do in the neuter and the nominative and accusative forms, singular and plural. So there's a lot of familiar territory, but there's also some new stuff here. Your goal needs to be, well, you should be able to write out this chart, but your goal of writing out this chart is to learn the endings for the purpose of recognition. Okay, you can see in the textbook there's a nice summary of the neuter. Remember, there's a neuter set of third declension endings, and there's a masculine/feminine set. So this summarizes the neuter set of endings. Notice it can be a sigma or nothing, and then in the genitive an os ending, and the dative singular a iota, right? These yellow highlighted ones are singular. In the accusative, a singular or nothing. You're like, how do I know whether it's a sigma or nothing? How do you know whether it's going to be a sigma ending? Well, you don't. You just observe it. You're like, well, what was it with pneuma? Because I look back there and I'm like, how is that? I don't understand. Well, remember, we have to look at the genitive form to get the whole stem. So the stem of that word, the real root there, the stem is pneumat. So what happens in the neuter is we have pneumat plus nothing, right? One of the possible endings is nothing. Greek does not like to end with words with tau, and so the tau drops off and we're left with pneuma. However, you'd never see that process happen. You just see the noun like this. So that's why we're memorizing the noun as it actually occurs, okay? And then here in the plural, our possible endings are alpha, own, sin, that is a movable nu, right? It may many times appear just as that, and then an alpha, right? So the plural endings for the neuter third declension and the singular endings for the neuter third declension. I had a student, Mike Mars, who one time shared a memory device that he came up with. He said, I made a little story, right? And we can sort of elaborate this story. I don't remember exactly how he said it, but there's a park near here, the park near the seminary called Cherokee Park. So I want you to imagine you're sitting out there with your dog. So we're going to make it a dog because to remember it's neutered. Imagine you have a neutered dog with you there, right? And you're sitting outside in the sun, right? Sitting, notice the correspondence between the sound of the consonants in the story and the endings here. Sitting outside in the sun. Imagine somebody comes up in the park and tries to sell you marijuana, which is maybe not that, you will smell it if you walk over there sometimes, and you graciously wave them aside. So you sit outside in the sun and wave sin aside, right? So I'm just going to write this down. Sit outside in sun and wave sin aside. Sit outside in sun and wave sin aside. Now, Mike Mars and I both know that that's not wave. It just looks like the English WV. It actually is the sound own, right? It sounds like own. So, but this is his memory device. I don't want to tweak it too much, and I like it. I think it works for students. And also most students own that genitive plural ending because it's always the same. So you can just kind of ignore that if you want. All right, there's also a third declension set of endings that's masculine and feminine. And so these endings are applied to masculine or feminine nouns. So let's look at an example of one of those. We'll look at the word flesh. Flesh. And hopefully you memorized or will memorize hey sarx, te sarkas. So I'm going to write it down here below. Just build it ourselves and then look up above and see how that worked, right? So we say, okay, Dr. Plummer asked me to memorize not just hey sarx, but he asked me to memorize te sarkas. Why am I doing that? I'm doing that so that I know it's a feminine noun. I'm doing that so I get the whole stem of the noun that is often combined or somehow distorted, or letters have dropped out in the nominative. I need to memorize the genitive to get the entire stem. Like, how do I get the stem? Well, you cut the os off, right? You cut that genitive singular ending off, or it might be us, or it might be os if it's combined with something at the end of the third declension noun. Now, I'll just tell you, I'm going to whisper this because I don't want to hurt you. Okay, there are about 30 variations of third declensions. Oh my goodness! That's way too much to memorize. So we're memorizing a neuter form, pneuma. We're memorizing one of the masculine/feminine forms. We're memorizing here just a feminine. We don't need to memorize a masculine and a feminine because it's the same set of endings. We're memorizing sarx. And then we're focusing on recognizing the other forms and realizing things are going to tweak here and there, and realizing a lot of the times these nouns will occur with the article, which does all the work for us, right? If 50% or more of the time the article is there, the article does the parsing for us. So we're not going to memorize more than we have to. We're focusing, memorizing a little bit, focusing on recognition, okay? Okay, so here we've started to build sarx, and just like the old-timey arrival boards at airports and so on, we're going to go ahead and stick our articles in here and prepare for that to roll down. Taste, tame, then the plural, high, tone, tice, tas, because the articles are the same, right? And then what do you think we're going to do? Yeah, we're going to take that sark, we're going to sark. Can you see the old-timey boards? There they go. Sark. In some ways, there were some beautiful things in those simpler days, weren't they? Okay, sark. So what do you think we're going to do for the dative singular? You tell me, what do you think we're going to do? Yeah, we're going to add a iota. That's right, we're going to add a iota on the end there. Boom. Why doesn't it subscript? Because iota can't subscript under a consonant, silly. It only subscripts under long vowels like omega, and eta, and alpha, right? Okay, so you're like, fair enough. Okay, how about the ending here? Well, it's going to be an alpha, right? And then here it's going to be an S. You're like, that looks totally different. Well, that's why this is called third declension. One way you can think about that is like the plural dresses. Sometimes we have a plural that's S. So sarkes. What about the genitive plural? What do you think that's going to be? Yeah, you're going to own that, right? Own that baby. Now, dative plural, there's problems here, right? Because plural dates can lead to sin. They're complex. Things happen. Things change. Yes. Think about what we've learned about the square of stops applies here with sigma and consonants, about how sigma combines. So what sound does kappa plus sigma make? It makes ks. So that is going to combine to be, let me write it in a different color here to illustrate it. Ooh, that's a really messy letter. So there's xi, and then here's our ending here. That's a parentheses around the new. Sarxin. And then finally, the last one here is sarkas, right? So you can see in a moment, we'll look up above and see how this works. We'll look at that chart, but right now let's just give a translation of these. So the flesh, of the flesh, to or for the flesh as the direct object. And then in plural, what is the plural of flesh in English? Just flesh, I think. But we sort of created an artificial English form, fleshes, to make sure that you know this is plural. The fleshes, of the fleshes, to or for the fleshes, the fleshes. Okay, that's what we put up above, at least at this point. The book's not published. Maybe the publisher will axe that, okay? But you can see up above, this is the same thing that I did down below, right? Sarx, sarkas, sarki, sarka, sarkes, sarkon, sarksin, sarkas. Notice again, I keep reminding you of this. The articles are all the feminine articles we've already learned, and they really do all the hard work for us, right? They confirm, if you're shaky on these new endings, they confirm, yes, that is dative plural. Yes, that is genitive singular. The endings for the masculine/feminine nouns are summarized below here, right? These are third declension endings for masculine or feminine. It could be sigma or nothing. Could be os, could be iota, could be alpha, right? So, pardon me, I should say it could be sigma or nothing. Here it's os, here it's iota, here it's alpha. In the plural, s, on, sin, os. And always remember that is a movable nu. Frequently that form will just occur with the sigma iota. So Mike Mars, he had his story for the neuter. Remember, he's sitting out there with his neuter dog, and he's like, yeah, sit outside in the sun and wave sin aside. So then you can imagine being out perhaps in the park. Again, we're imagining a place where people are trying to push marijuana and stuff on you. And imagine that you're with, it's masculine and slash feminine, so imagine you're with your wife or your girlfriend. So you want her to be comfortable, so you bring an armchair, right? Sit outside in the armchair, especially, man, you wouldn't want anyone to be able to make your wife or girlfriend feel uncomfortable, especially waving sin aside, right? Sit outside in armchair, especially waving sin aside. So what should you do? You should use this memory device or some other memory device and be able to write out the paradigm for pneuma accurately with the article. You should use this memory device or some other method and be able to write out the paradigm for sarx, right, to write the whole thing out. You should learn all the third declension nouns that we're doing. You should learn all of them with the article, for example, ha on air, and with the genitive form, to andros. You need to learn it that way so that you'll have the stem that the rest of the word builds on, so you'll be able to recognize those forms when you run into them. Read the chapter, work on it, really work on nailing this, and then drive it home through the practice and the homework to make sure that you've really learned it.